We want to welcome everyone here. Are we excited to have Governor Cuomo with us? Are we excited to have the public advocate, Tish James, with us? We are also joined by Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, Congressman and Evander Child's alumni, Congressman Elliot Engels, with us. Our State Senator Jamal Bailey's with us. Our Council Member Andy King. Also from Evander, we have Council Member Richie Torres. The Vice President for Academic High Schools for the UFT, Ms. Janella Hines, is with us this morning. We have Rebecca Fisher, the Executive Director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. And Alex Clavering and students from the March for Our Lives in New York City. New York City says enough, and guns down, lives up. Ladies and gentlemen, very quickly, my name is Ruben Diaz Jr., and I am the Bronx Borough President. I wish we didn't have to be here. I wish this was a press conference and an announcement that we didn't have to have. And I say that because over the last 9 years, as many of you may know, as the Borough President, I've been working with my colleagues in government, with community advocates, community leaders, and this young man right here, Governor Cuomo, on making the Bronx better and making New York City and New York State better. We've done a lot around economic development. We've done a lot of work around housing. In fact, Governor Cuomo and his housing agency has allotted more than $1 billion for housing over the last 9 years alone. Let's give him a strong round of applause. We've worked to create jobs. Unemployment in the Bronx is at 5.8%. 120,000 more Bronxites are working today than the first day that I took office. Thanks again for the help that the governor has given us. We have worked on transportation infrastructure, 4 Metro North stations, $1.8 billion to restore the Brooklyn-Sheridan interchange. And we do this, ladies and gentlemen, because we are planning with a purpose. And that purpose is our future. And that future is all of you, young men and women, not only here with us today, but all over the city, the state, and the country. Make some noise. However, that future is threatened every single day by gun violence. We see it from the hallways of Sandy Hook to the streets of the South Bronx. It seems like there's this obsession with guns in this country. It is a crisis. And unfortunately, what we hear is so many people who have lives that are lost and loved ones, and Congress and Washington still hasn't acted. It is a crisis, ladies and gentlemen, because since Columbine alone, 1999, since 1999, we've seen over 187,000 students that have been exposed to gun violence. Since 2012, Sandy Hook, there have been at least 239 shootings. We do have a crisis. And fortunately, our future, our youth, after Parkland, came out and spoke and mobilized. Fortunately, our future is in good hands. Fortunately, we have young voices that we haven't heard in this debate in years past come together and let Congress know that enough is enough and we have to do something now. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear from the governor and his plan to make sure that our schools are safer, and the piece of legislation that we must all come together and support to ensure that it's passed in the legislature up in Albany. you also will hear from our public advocate, the fearless Letitia Tish James. But it's my job today to introduce someone who represents that future, someone who represents that strong voice, someone who is being heard, because all of you, don't trivialize the power of your voices. Do not trivialize the strength that you have collectively. But today to speak on your behalf is Amir Rattray, who's a senior at the High School of Contemporary Arts, and speaks to introduce not only the governor, but introduce that strong voice that this country for so long has been missing. As the borough president, I am so proud of the youth here today. As the borough president, I am even more proud and honored to introduce Miss Amir Rattray.
Good morning. My name is Amir Rattray. I am a student at the High School for Contemporary Arts in the Bronx, as well as a member and president of the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program. I am proud to be here to speak up for the safety of my classmates. Across the nation, young people are rising up and speaking out, demanding action to end the threat of school shootings. We believe that no student should go to school fearing for their lives. In New York, we have leaders like Governor Cuomo who are listening. Governor Cuomo has been a national champion for gun safety, passing the strongest laws in the nation. And today, the governor and other leaders are fighting for new legislation that will go even further to strengthen our laws and keep us safe at school. While the federal government in Washington ignores the pleas of students across the country, Governor Cuomo is listening, taking action, and shining a path for other states to follow. I want to thank the governor for everything he is doing to combat gun violence and keep our community safe. So it is my honor to introduce a leading voice for gun safety in this country, the 56th governor of New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Let's hear it for Amir. Isn't she great? And let's hear it for Evander Child School. Now first, for your borough president, who speaks with pride about all that's going on in the Bronx, and he should. We were just on the bus with some younger people, younger than myself, younger than the borough president, and they were saying, almost a little younger. One of the young people was saying, you know, I hear all great things are happening in the Bronx. And I said, well, that's because you hear about the new Bronx. The Bronx wasn't always the comeback story. For many years, the Bronx suffered. For many years, the Bronx didn't get the help that it needed to grow the way it's growing. But that's all the past, and that's all history. And the new Bronx, and this borough president, and the new leadership of the Bronx is the borough to watch. Unemployment is down, jobs are down, people are coming back. It's all happening here in the Bronx.
They're excited too.
Yep, they're blowing the horn for Evander Child School. Let's give them a round of applause. They're blowing the horn. The borough president went through the group that's with us, but let me do it again because they are special, and they're going to be with us on a statewide tour. Once again, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, our great public advocate Tish James, our Senator Jamel Bailey, who's going to take this bill and make it happen in Albany, a great young star, Council Member Richie Torres, Janella Hines, who's the vice president. Let's give her a round of applause. Rebecca Fisher from the New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. Alex Clavering, and the students from March for Our Lives, New York City. Special shout out to Congressman Elliot Engel, an alumni of this school. Says to each and every one of you, if you want to be a great congressman, you can be. Great congressperson. And to Richie Torres, who's done a great job, and Andy King. Well, I'm a little late. Andy King is a great councilman. We're a little late in getting here because we had an embarrassing situation. I was wearing the same jacket that Andy King is wearing today. And I had to stop and change because Andy was embarrassed that we'd be wearing the same thing. So let's give Andy King another round of applause. The borough president is right. So much good that's going on here in the Bronx. It's sad that today we have to talk about a problem. But it's not a Bronx problem. It's not a New York problem. It's a nationwide problem. And that is the scourge of gun violence and school shootings. Now, this is new. 10 years ago, you did not hear about the school shootings yet today, like today. The numbers are frightening because they're only getting worse. We're 23 weeks into the new year. You know how many school shootings there have been this year? 23. Averaging one a week. Listen to this. We've lost more students to gun violence than we've lost military servicemen and women at war this year. Just think about that. The war is here and the war is at home. Now we have a federal government who says we can't do anything. Nothing we can do. We don't know what to do. Why do they say that? They say that for two reasons. Number one, they're ruled by a group called the NRA, National Rifle Association, and their answer at the NRA is always the same. You know the answer to gun violence? More guns. Arm the teachers. Arm everybody. And we'll have a shootout whenever there's a problem. It's madness. The NRA says that because the NRA represents gun manufacturers. And they want to sell more guns. The answer is not more guns, my friend. The answer is fewer guns and guns in the hands of people who should actually have guns. That's the answer. Here in New York, we're not listening to Washington, we're not waiting for Washington. New Yorkers don't accept the answer, there's nothing we can do. Because it's not the truth. There's always an answer to a problem if you have the courage to stand up and admit it. And maybe Washington wants to live in a state of denial, but this is the state of New York, and we don't believe in denial. And we have taken a comprehensive approach. We're educating people about guns. We have community-based programs that are getting guns off the street. We fund a program called SNUG, working with community operations all around the state. We spent over $1 million here in the Bronx on community-based solutions. And we passed a law 5 years ago after a school shooting in Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook, Connecticut was a lot like Parkland, Florida, just 5 years earlier. It didn't capture the national imagination. It didn't mobilize the young people the way Parkland, Florida has. But it was the same thing. A young person went into a school, shot students, shot teachers, shot youngsters. And after Sandy Hook 5 years ago, you know what this state said? It said, enough is enough. We're not waiting for Washington. We're going to take matters into our own hand. We passed the SAFE Act, which is the smartest gun control law in the United States of America. It does everything we're still trying to do today, 5 years later. It banned military-style assault weapons. It said no more than 10 bullets in a gun. It said, let's have a mental health database. So if we know people are mentally ill, we don't let them buy a gun. That's common sense. You know how many people are on that mental health database today over the past 5 years? 77,000. Think about that. 77,000 mentally ill people who shouldn't be able to buy a gun. The day before the SAFE Act passed, they could buy a gun. And now 77,000 people are prohibited from an access to a gun. It is common sense. And let me tell you what else the SAFE Act did. It put a lie to all the excuses that Washington is making. You listen to their excuses. Well, we can't pass a gun control bill because it'll be a slippery slope, and government just wants to take guns from everybody. It's a lie. It's a lie. We passed the SAFE Act 5 years ago. You know what? Hunters still can hunt. Legal owners still can have a gun. But mentally ill people, people who shouldn't have a gun, people who are dangerous, they're the ones who no longer can get a gun. So don't tell me we can't pass sensible gun control because we did it in New York. And while they're sitting around there in Washington saying nothing can be done, we're going to take the next step. Because you know what New York does? New York leads. That's what we do. We face the tough problems and we develop solutions. And we have a new solution that is pending in Albany today as we speak. It's called the Red Flag Bill. Again, it's common sense. It says basically two things. If a parent knows a child may be mentally ill, may be disturbed, may be violent, and that parent wants to get that child help, that parent can go to a judge and ask the judge to do a mental health evaluation of the child. And if they find that the child is mentally ill and violent, they can take the guns from that child and make sure that child can't have access to guns. You know what every parent wants? To keep their child safe. I have 3 daughters. If I knew one of them had a mental health issue and that maybe she could get a gun and take her own life or hurt others, the first thing I would want to do with every cell in my body is to help my daughter. And if I knew that I could get my daughter help by going to a judge and saying, please, let somebody evaluate my child. And if my child can be dangerous, please keep my child safe. That is the first thing I would do. You know, the first person who normally gets killed by a child with a gun is that child. We've seen how many suicides there have been just recently. You don't want a mentally ill child to have a gun. The second thing the bill does is also common sense. You know who knows when a student is in trouble and when a student is dangerous or could be dangerous? The teachers know. The teachers watch. They see the change in behavior. The teachers talk to other teachers. The teachers talk to other students. And they know 40% of the school shootings, when you go back and look at them, the teachers say, I knew there was something wrong. And the teachers are frustrated because they say, you know what, there's nothing I could do. Child hadn't committed a crime, the student hadn't committed a crime, there was nothing they could do. What this bill says is if a teacher believes a child is dangerous, that teacher has a right to go to the principal or the superintendent or the school nurse, or that teacher directly can go to a judge and say, you know what, I think this child needs help. I think this student needs help. Will you get them an evaluation? And if it turns out that student needs help, then get the student the help they need before a teacher gets hurt or a student gets hurt. My friends, it is just common sense. 23 school shootings, it has to end. Enough is enough. I'm not afraid of the NRA. I'm not afraid of the opposition that spreads these lies, that we're going to take guns away, that we're going to violate the Second Amendment. We're not going to do any of that. We just want to make sure that people who are mentally ill and people who are dangerous shouldn't have a gun, because they shouldn't take their own life or a student's life or a teacher's life, because too many innocents are being killed in this state and in this country, and we want it to stop, and we want it to stop now. Now, how do we stop it? When you're sitting in a classroom and they teach you about government, they talk about how the political leaders stepped up and made change. Sometimes that happens. But you know how change normally happens? It happens when the people demand change. It happens when the people stand up and they make their voice heard, and then the politicians listen to the people. What you see now with this student movement is young people saying, these are our lives. They're our schools. They're our friends who lost their lives. And enough is enough, and we're not going to take these answers from government where they say there's nothing we can do, because we know there's something we can do. The problem is the cowardice of the politicians, the apathy of the politicians. The problem is the bureaucracy. The problem is the NRA's lobbying and the NRA's money. And that shouldn't be the reason that young people still die every week in this country. And enough is enough, and they're going to make their voice heard. And the politicians have two choices. Either the politicians change their position and they vote in Albany and they pass this red flag bill, or this student movement, this populist movement, will change the politicians this election day. It's that simple. Thank you. God bless you.
Another round of applause for Governor Cuomo. Oh, you can do better than that, Governor Cuomo. It's an honor and a privilege to be here in the great borough of the Bronx. I want to thank my friend Ruben Diaz, the great borough president of the Bronx, for all that he has done in transforming the Bronx. Thank him for, again, responding to the needs of the countless number of young people who are here today. Another round of applause to Ruben Diaz. And of course, to all of my colleagues in government, I thank them for being here today, and I particularly want to thank the young people. I am energized by young people because I know that all throughout the history of this country, every movement that we have been involved in has been led by young people. And so I say today, If elected officials in Albany don't move the bill, then these young people will move them out of office, right? Yeah. And so today we join with our great governor, who has led the way, because the governor understands something very simple, and that is we have all entered into public office because we believe that government should be in a position to get things done, and that government should be in a position to respond to the needs of Americans and citizens and New Yorkers. And at each and every turn, the man who has led this state and this nation with regards to gun violence is Governor Andrew Cuomo. No, you can do better than that. I said the 56th governor of the state of New York, not number 45, 56. A round of applause. And so he's joining with these young people to march for their lives. Well, we sort of are taking a bus, but that's okay. We're still marching for their lives. And so today we are calling upon Albany to take a smart and sensible step to keep schools like this safe. And as I travel all throughout this city and throughout this state, I meet a lot of young people, and I know these young people know intimately about gun violence, particularly here in the Bronx and in the borough that I come from, which I will not mention, but it also begins with a B.
We love Brooklyn.
Okay, calm down.
We love Brooklyn.
Gun violence is a major issue. And a number of these children have lost their family members and they've lost their friends. And one of the worst things about being an elected official is that we attend too many funerals of young people who die prematurely as a result of gun violence. And as a result of the leadership of this governor who has put forth this legislation, this extreme risk protection order legislation, which represents a critical step to address the threat of school shootings and literally will save lives. The majority of mass shootings and people who commit suicide show signs of their intention. But our law renders teachers and their families, who are often the first to see these signs, unable to take necessary action. But this legislation will turn teachers and their parents into basically first responders to remove those guns and to provide them with the resources that they so desperately need, and to protect children, because when it comes to gun violence, gun violence obviously should be an issue that we should be responding to, but it should not be an issue that we should be talking to at a school. In fact, what we should be talking about is how these children will graduate and how they'll go on to college in a number of weeks. That's what really education is really all about. And so today, more than ever, we need to strengthen our gun laws and ensure that dangerous guns don't end up in the wrong hands, and particularly in those who are suffering from a mental disorder. And so I want to thank the governor. I want to thank him for his leadership, because New York, once again, is setting an example. And unfortunately, the federal government will follow. And what they should do is take cues from the governor and respond again to the needs of Americans and to New Yorkers, and to keep these children safe and to keep our streets safe, and to, again, make sure that everyone knows that this is really not about, again, repealing the Second Amendment. This is about keeping New Yorkers and children and individuals safe, and keeping guns away from individuals who are dangerous. And so today, this is a great day. And what I say, as I have said before, let's move the bill, pass the bill, keep these children safe, keep our city safe, keep our state safe, keep America safe. That's what we've got to do. Move the bill, pass the bill, show some leadership like Governor Cuomo is doing. And we need to do it not in New York, but in all the states of this great country. This is what makes America great. Leadership makes America great. Governor Cuomo makes New York great. And this is a great day for New York State. Thank you, Governor.
Beautiful. Beautiful.